by any standards. So she was able to put together another picture of another level of psychopathy based on the case histories that she took about them through their victims. And it wasn't just, one person saying, well, he did this, he did that. It was a more comprehensive process than that because, she did follow up on these things and collect actual information. So then there was another more recent study done at a university by a group of researchers who had devised a questionnaire that was able to extract certain information about a broad population of university students, and they came up with the startling result that about 25% of the students in a university exhibited a certain profile of psychopathic personality, and yet they were what you would consider to be, law-abiding, going to a university, getting a degree, planning a career. And then, of course, that meshed with what Cleckley had pointed out, that there were psychopaths, doctors, judges, lawyers, politicians, because he was able to extrapolate what he observed about these people that were his patients to a wider population of human beings and to notice that their behaviors matched.
So there's actually more of them among us than we might even realize. Let me ask you this. What is the difference between a psychopath and a non-psychopath? What is the one thing, well, there's probably a lot of things, but the major thing that differentiates a psychopath from a non-psychopath?
Oh, that's pretty easy. It's conscience.
They don't have one, right?
A psychopath simply doesn't have one. And this is one of the most difficult things for a normal human being who has a conscience to comprehend. A psychopath doesn't have one. Now, whether this lack of conscience is an esoteric thing or whether it is a brain dysfunction, is still up in the air. But the fact is that brain scans have been done of people who have been diagnosed as psychopaths, and their brain scans do not even look like normal human brain scans. So obviously their brains function quite differently. Lobachevsky, of course, has a theory for it. He talks at some length about the substratum of the human being, the human psychology, and that there is an instinctive substratum, which in normal human beings, connects us with other people through, long evolution or whatever, cause you might want to ascribe to it. Normal human beings, and here I use the word normal in a very specific context as meaning somebody who has a conscience
right,
as opposed to somebody who doesn't. I mean, there are a lot of people who have consciences who we would clearly say, well, they're really not normal. That's generally due to, some acquired deficiencies or they've been psychologically abused or whatever. So, let's be specific about this term normal. It means somebody who has the ability to empathize with another human being
right,
opposed to someone who does not.
I noticed in my reading that the psychopathic person, they don't feel the emotions the way we do. They can simulate the language of emotion so that they can connect with other people. It's like, who was it? I don't know who said it. Maybe Ark said it, your husband, or maybe it was Lobachevsky. They anchor into a person's head, into their mind, into their brain.
Through the use of their words, yes. It's the problem with conscience comes back because the ability to empathize seems to be based on spatiotemporal perception. That is, that you can imagine something in space and time. You can imagine a future consequence, or you can remember a past, hurt that you experienced. And then if you see someone experiencing something similar to what you experienced before, you can imagine how they feel. And if you do something that brought a result into your life that was not happy in the past, you can imagine in the future that if you do it again, that a similar thing will happen. A psychopath doesn't seem to be able to do this. They have no ability to, for one thing, things do not hurt them the way they hurt us. For them, losing a friend or losing a mate or losing a partner or losing a job is a minor inconvenience. It only inconveniences them insofar as, well, now I've got to go and find some other source of, of sex, money, food, whatever, So for them, the idea of losing a beloved wife because she a man, for example, because she divorces him because he is such a jerk,
mm-hmm.
He may become enraged and stalk her and carry on because, because he wants to reassert his power. But if she does actually remove herself completely from his reach, he'll stop and he will just be enraged simply because he has lost his source. And then he will just simply look for another. He will never hurt because he has lost love. For him, love is supplying his needs.
Right.
So that's the problem. They don't seem to have this ability to abstractly understand, pain and suffering and hurt, either their own or anyone else's, because they don't experience it to begin with, and they can't imagine it in the past or present or future. There's no ability to connect whatsoever.
This political ponerology book had a very difficult path to emergence into the public arena, and it hasn't even really been brought out into the wider public arena yet. But there were 3 versions of this manuscript the author describes. The first one went into the furnace just minutes prior to a raid, I guess, of his home. The second draft was sent via an American tourist to the Vatican, and nothing ever came of it. They don't know what happened to that manuscript. They never heard anything back. The third version, I guess, made it to America and was suppressed by Zbigniew Brzezinski. Very interesting. Why would Brzezinski suppress this book?
Well, that probably is somewhat self-evident, because Brzezinski is clearly part of this controlling elite.
It exposes them, doesn't it? The neocons?
It exposes them, and the book itself would be a handbook, a guide, a manual for other people, particularly even psychologists, to begin to get an inkling of exactly what they're up against in terms of dealing with the power elite. You got to understand that the psychopath is a very efficient machine. I mean, just imagine not having a conscience.
So what you're saying is that they are a different type of human being.
Yeah, exactly. And Lobachevsky, and even Malloy, who is another clinical psychologist who has written extensively on psychopathy, discusses the fact that there is something even well, he actually refers to it as a reptilian nature, and that the effect of the psychopath on normal human beings is similar to the effect of a snake on say, a mouse or a bird, that they become frozen, that there is something, maybe it has something to do with a scent. Maybe they give off an odor that reaches inside the normal human being that paralyzes their thinking processes, because, there's very little that can explain how a psychopath can affect the normal human being the way they do. The most typical example that I think of when I think of this power that the psychopath has over human beings is this scene in Silence of the Lambs where they talk about how Hannibal Lecter convinced his cellmate to swallow his own tongue and thereby commit suicide. Through their words, they can convince people to do just about anything. They have, and it's not just the words. There is something else, something that is hard to reach, hard to get to. And Malloy refers to it specifically as an almost reptilian quality that is quite frightening.
I got a lot out of this book. This is a book that you have to read in total quiet and really concentrate. And you have to read it more than once to really internalize. And I'm still internalizing what's going on in this book. But he says in this book, this is my understanding, evil is contagious, that it infects like an epidemic. It spreads like an epidemic to the people around it. So it can affect one other person or a small group or an entire population. And I was reading something else by this Francois de Bernard in the New Nero. I guess it was published in Haaretz, March of 2003. And he said this: the U.S. has become a pathocracy, a regime neurotic in essence, the leaders of which are quite simply psychopaths. And I was thinking about this, all of this, you know, how we're trying to expose 9/11 truth. And we wonder, with all of this information that's been coming out in the mainstream, at the lack of outrage among the population that watches this, the mainstream everyday Joe Q citizen. And I was thinking, if we are raised in a culture, in a society that's been designed by psychopaths, we're more desensitized to evil, and we're actually being conditioned to embrace it, aren't we?